When we were planning this event, it was clear that reparations was going to be a part of the conversation. After decades of disappointment, the discussion about reparations has gained a lot of momentum. I'm sure that you guys have seen it in the news. You've been part of these discussions that are happening in communities around the country. Local communities are exploring possibilities and doing so in a myriad of ways. And so what we've seen is, I can say for me, greater momentum than I expected to see in my lifetime. The conversation has really accelerated, and we're in a time where this looks like it could be a reality for a lot of places around the country if we don't take our foot off the gas, right? So we know that people come to the conversation from different walks of life with different perspectives and varying levels of knowledge about the subject. We also know that the decisions about reparations are difficult, the discussions are difficult. It could be a week-long conference to talk about reparations in the United States. And so we considered what we could contribute to the conversation in 1 hour. And we concluded that we could provide a common understanding of current issues and best practices in our community as we grapple with next steps, right? And we couldn't have a better guest for this conversation than Dr. Andre Perry. I'm going to read his bio for you. He's very accomplished, and I'm grateful that he's here. Dr. Perry is a senior fellow and director of the Center for Community Uplift at the Brookings Institution. He's also a professor of practice of economics at Washington University in St. Louis. Dr. Perry co-authored the groundbreaking 2020 Brookings Institution report, Why We Need Reparations for Black Americans. A nationally known and respected commentator on race, structural inequality, and education, he's the author of 2 books, Black Power Scorecard, Measuring the Racial Gap and What We Can Do to Close It, and Know Your Price, Valuing Black Lives and Property in America's Cities. He is a regular contributor to MSNBC and has been published by numerous national media outlets, including the New York Times, the Washington Post, The Nation, Bloomberg City Lab, and CNN.com. Dr. Perry has also made appearances on HBO, CNN, PBS, NPR, NBC, and ABC, all the acronyms. And so welcome, join me in welcoming Dr. Perry.
Thank you, Asha. It's a pleasure. You know what, I mean, this is a big deal. I didn't know what I was expecting when I pulled up my car and I could not find a parking spot.
Lord have mercy.
And that's not a fault of organizing, that's just a fault of demand. People want this.
Yeah.
And this is a special moment for all of you, so I'm glad to celebrate along with you. County Executive Pittman, tremendous step in the right direction, and ultimately people are going to ask questions about reparations. So I'm glad to be a part of this conversation.
Thank you so much. And I apologize for the parking to everyone.
No. It's really about the man.
It is. We're at a special point in history, so I'm glad that we're having this conversation. So in the interest of having a common language around reparations, in the context that we're talking about it today, what is your simple working definition of reparations?
I mean, it's a system of repair for an egregious harm. It's really baked in the title, part of the title of this program, Truth, Apology, and Repair. There are a couple pieces missing, maybe in an overall system of reparations, truth, and then there's reconciliation of that truth with populations. There is an apology that's issued. There's repair in some form. Most people think of a check being cut, but there's also services and other things that are at play. But then there's something else that's missing, and we can't forget about this. It's about non-repetition. So it's also about making sure that these harms aren't created again. And so, but overall, it's a system of redressing and atoning for an egregious harm.
Thanks for that.
Now that's it. You can take this one too.
Okay, we're back. And thank you for that. What's the precedent for reparations in the US? Like, when has reparations been granted here and why?
Well, based on that basic definition, we had reparations in a lot of different contexts. And I won't talk about the Japanese who've been interned because, I mean, many of the reparations programs, I mean, weren't robust reparations programs. Certainly you can consider some form of reparations for Native Americans. But remember, during the pandemic, the PPP loan programs, those are a form of reparations. When there's some kind of harm, the federal, state, and local governments ask businesses to shut down, led by the federal government. Guess what? There was some kind of system of addressing that government-sponsored harm because businesses were harmed. So you have a PPP loan program. We kind of knew we were going to forgive those loans. And 9/11 victims. You know, only time there's questions or concerns about reparations is when it comes to Black people. But, you know, it's not a controversial topic. We make it so. So this is about just providing what is owed, addressing the harm, because this is the thing. It certainly has a number of harms for the descendants of the enslaved, the people who are discriminated against, but it also is harming the society writ large. You know, when you cut off growth for any population, you throttle economic progress, you throttle community development. So certainly I want to see the repair to the people who were directly harmed. But I also want people to see that this is not a zero-sum game. Investing in one group is not taking away from another. And just to be clear, when people talk about reparations, it's, you know, my grandfather didn't own any slaves.
Always.
You're right. We're talking about federal, state, and local harms that were enacted. And so Executive Pittman is not saying, apologizing for himself. He may, but that's not the issue at hand. This is the role of the government. And what the government did. And so we gotta always remember what this is about. This is not a personal thing, so to speak. This is about addressing what government entities, not just government, but corporate entities as well, have done to African Americans, and in other contexts, other groups.
I'm really glad that you emphasized that. You know, when Chris Haley and I were working together to develop the remarks for today, one of the things he said to me is that, you know, he really tries to focus on laws, right? Because a lot of people don't think about the fact that it's not just that slavery was legal. It's not just that Jim Crow was legal. It's in fact that it was the government that created the system. So it's not just like, okay, it's okay to do this. The government advanced an agenda of Jim Crow, advanced an agenda of slavery. And so there are harms when you know, we always hear people say, my grandfather didn't do that, and you know, my cousin didn't do that, but it's not about that, it's much bigger than that. And
I also there is a debate on what is considered reparations. There are people who feel that any kind of local effort to atone is not considered reparations. Some people feel that it almost has to be a congressional act. I take a different approach. I really just look at any kind of government entity that had created harm. They have a responsibility to atone. But there's debate in this, that if you're talking about slavery, some people will say that is the federal government's role and not local governments. But I always remind folks who say that actually the first endorsed slavery program occurred at a state level. It was Massachusetts. And we had a number of states and cities that enacted innumerable harms. I mean, the Fourth Ward, I believe here, suffered significant damage to many of the community economic development processes. And so, but I just wanted to acknowledge that there are people, there's debate around what is reparations. But I generally believe that any entity, if someone hits you in a car accident, they have to be responsible for that. We understand that. So any kind of damage that, in this case, deliberate harm that's enacted, I feel that there needs to be some kind of process of atonement.
So to that end, I have a follow-up question for you. I often hear people saying that, and I'm thinking about the framework that you're talking about, and that's why I started with that question, like how do you conceptualize reparations? Like, I think it's important for us to know that a lot of people think differently on this subject, including people in the affected community. But I've heard this argument that wealthy African Americans, right? People always say, like, Michael Jordan did fine. Wealthy African Americans would not deserve reparations, right? Like that, I think it's almost a complicating factor as people think about how would reparations be effectuated. Like, do you look at people who are suffering? Is it only people who are low income? How do you determine the extent of the harm on an individual person? Can you speak a little bit to whether there's a necessary connection between a person's individual wealth and their entitlement to reparations?
Well, no, okay, there's two things here. So, someone can be entitled to reparations regardless of their wealth status because they were harmed. There were damages to individuals and families, and they theoretically could be wealthier. And so it's about addressing that harm. Now there's the political dynamics of this. Certainly, when you're talking about any kind of repair program, people are less sympathetic to cut a check, in particular, to someone who's well above average wealth. And so it's an argument of, yes, from a pure standpoint, if your family did not receive wages for work and they are owed and were never paid, that was never addressed, yes. But there is also the reality, a political reality. My son, and I'll explain, my father lived in areas where homes were devalued, limited opportunities. My father was murdered in prison. His father was murdered. I had a very different wealth profile. Now my son, right?
Yeah.
It's very different from me and my father.
Right. Yeah.
Does my son get reparations? Certainly he can be entitled to some claim. But if I'm making the argument from a political perspective, if you are a politician, a county executive, a governor, a president, how are you going to structure this program? And so there's the political reality and there's sort of the pure reparations program. And those are the things we're going to have to struggle with. The purists will demand reparations. The folks who just want to get something done and deal with suffering, because there are people who are still suffering. And so, I typically don't share my thoughts, but I'm more on the side right now of making sure that we deal with suffering. Right? I'm very clear that we have people who are not given a chance. We had a group of folks who are doing great work, but I do need to insert, when it comes to education, when it comes to business development, all these things, you can have some kind of reparative structure. In education, though, education doesn't predict for wealth. Wealth predicts for education, right? And so it's home ownership, it's business ownership. When people have wealth, they miraculously do well in school, right? And maybe they don't do well in school, but they live long lives, they thrive, right? And so for me, the priority is always give people the wealth that will enable them to thrive, right? I want people to thrive. I also, and this is the debate, and I'm part of the debate. I'm in the national debates on that. I'm part of the debate. Some people feel that the way you measure reparations is by looking at the wealth gap, and when you close the wealth gap, that is essentially a system of reparations. You try to close the wealth gap. That's going to be a harder lift politically. Estimates around $3 trillion, $14 trillion to close the wealth gap, depending on who's doing the counting. And that's different from providing the resources necessary so that people live a long and healthy life. So I'm at the point where I want to see people thrive, regardless of if we close the wealth gap or not. Because that's going to take a lot of time. But for me, it is about making sure we deal with the suffering that comes from resource deprivation. And we see that. Maryland is such an interesting place because we brag about having some of the wealthiest counties for Black people, right?
Yes, we do.
We brag about it.
Yes.
And at the same time, you could go right to the street and see people who've never had 2 nickels to rub against each other, right? And so I always had a more service orientation to this. I try to create research that is in service to policy and people. My sort of inclination is to deal with the suffering. Deal with the policy, but deal with the suffering. And so it's debatable. No one will ever, if you know me, you know I believe in reparations. I also believe in being politically expedient and smart. That it's going to take many different steps to that. Brother Robert Turner is here. I'm going to lift up his book, Creating a Culture of Repair. He's over there, brother, doing great work. He literally marches every month from Baltimore to D.C. There are a lot of people working on this. And there are a lot of different perspectives, right? And I'm at the place where I'm okay with having these debates. And they should be robust, right?
Must be.
Must be. And there should be people say, no, Brother Perry, you're wrong. Right? Like, that's okay. What is not okay is we shut ourselves down in these movements. So, let's debate, let's have differences of opinion, let's have accepting our positionality in this. Some people are madly upset that Westmore did not sign a reparations bill. Right? right? That's okay. We can talk about this.
Yeah.
We also need to know the brother's running for president, right? And there is a lot, there's a lot of thinking that goes behind your policy footprint moving forward if you're running for office. It's easier to do something at the local level right now, right? That's just the reality. And so, but I don't begrudge people who are mad at Brother Moore, but I also understand the political realities that we need to hold both in our hands.
Yeah.
And so, let's not skirt around these issues and say, oh, this is the right way and I'm right. No, sometimes we just got to wrestle with these realities and do it with grace.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that difference of opinion revealed is that, in fact, there's a difference of opinion among people who care very deeply about this issue, right? Black people are not in any way monolithic. And so there are a variety of opinions around what reparations can look like, what it should look like, what the best approach is. And we have to really make room for people to talk about it and not shut down the conversation. So thank you for raising that. I'm glad that you brought up this topic of the wealth gap, though. So in some of your writing, you said that Blacks cannot close the racial wealth gap by changing their individual behavior. That's by assuming more personal responsibility or acquiring the portfolio management insights associated with financial literacy. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. You've talked about the wealth gap, and for people who I think we bandied the term about, but there's the fact that Black people are less wealthy on average than white people, and then there's the size of the gap. So even as Black people become more wealthy, the difference between how Black people are doing and how white people are doing remains constant. Even as Black people make more money, white people make more money, and then the gap is still the same, right? I mean, I am no economist, but in sum and substance.
Just to put it in short,
yes.
Black wealth is growing.
Yes.
White wealth is just growing at a much faster rate. Now, this is the thing. The areas where wealth is concentrated for Black people is different than what it is for Asian and white people. Most of Black wealth is concentrated in home ownership and business ownership. For white and Asian, and Black and Latinos generally look the same. There's one major difference. Latino wealth, there's much less equity in business development. But for whites and Asian, there's a big difference in activity in the stock market, right? So that's a reflection of historic discrimination. Black people have less resources to invest in other areas, right? And so people who had the resources, they invested in the stock market, they're seeing growth. And we are not seeing the kind of, although certainly the wealth in housing has skyrocketed over time, wealth in the stock market is really taking off. Mm-hmm. So we're doing some good things right now, and we need to acknowledge that even people in this room are improving the conditions of Americans, particularly Black Americans. But how historic racism shows up is not having a down payment, right? And so part of repair then looks like creating some type of product that enables people to get a loan without a down payment, right? And we can do these things. We have special purpose credit programs that enable financial institutions to change underwriting standards, and I'm not talking about 2007 or 2008. where they were essentially giving out loans indiscriminately. I'm talking about identifying the invisible prime borrowers, the borrowers who are doing everything right. It's just that their grandfather could not own a property. And just to throw out some numbers here, just to be clear, the Fed did a study not that long ago that showed when white families graduate from college, they can expect an intergenerational wealth transfer. They get a car, they get a down payment for a home, whatever. And this is why I'm a little bitter about this, but when black people graduate from college, they're expected to give money to their family. I remember walking off that stage, and, you know, people, the family gave me like $50 here, $50 there, and then Auntie said, you know, my roof is leaking, and you got to give that money up. That's right. So that's how discrimination. So some of the repair has to occur by using market-based solutions to just acknowledge. You know, some of this is around truth acknowledgement. If you acknowledge that, then you need to create systems that allow people to generate wealth, to get opportunities. We essentially have free college at the community college level. There should be a free college option at the 4-year level. Yes. Right? That it particularly not, and this would not just help African Americans. This would help everybody. But you can see a system that gets there by saying, you know what? Hey, if you are prepared for college, you should go to College Park, you should go to Bowie, you should go to, and it should be subsidized, right? So there's different kind of things we can implement that will help everyone. But we do have to have the orientation of how do I address this past discrimination? Because when you do that, you see different solutions that are very pragmatic, very practical. And we've had, and going back to the whole reparations piece, our county executive, the farming background, we know that black farmers were denied subsidies historically. And the one area where we did, acknowledge that we must pay farmers has been challenged, but we did acknowledge because farmers' growth was directly dependent upon subsidy by the government, right? And so the denial. So we should create systems that enable farmers, enable students, anyone that expresses a wealth gap that was created by some kind of systemic flaw. We have to address that. So for me, there are lots, there's so many solutions we could have if we learned how to deal with the anti-black legislation of the past. Yes. And trust me, we all can benefit by addressing it.
So on that point, and I know that they're like GI Bill, right? Social Security, obviously redlining programs, that were policies that were advanced that intentionally excluded and disadvantaged black people over time, preventing them from acquiring capital in the same ways that white Americans have. White Americans have benefited directly from government subsidies, government programs. There are some people who get really worked up about the idea of doing reparative justice work that benefits people beyond black people, right? So, for example, as you were just saying, if there were a free four-year college option, and it was available to everyone, who meets certain income level, whatever, there's eligibility criteria, but if it's not race specific, some people look at that and say, well, that's not reparations because it's not intended for us. It's not designed for us. See, so we have a person who feels that way in the audience. What is your opinion on that, to the extent that you want to give it? Because I did hear you talk about the political realities also of having to move work forward. And so how do you wrap your mind around that?
Yeah, again, I've always said direct harms in particular, you have got to redress. And this is very clear on the environmental justice space. There are many people, Black people in particular, who are living still in toxic areas, right?
Yep.
That we have the evidence of higher cancer rates, higher all kind of health disparities we see. And in some cases, we are actually providing resources. In Houston, Texas, we moved people, or the mayor who recently passed, provided relocation assistance for people to move out of this industrial zone to a safer zone, acknowledging that something was done wrong. The problem was that they provided some, let's call it reparations. They didn't call it that. But it was based on home values, and we know housing is devalued in Black neighborhoods, you know, and so we must create some type of program that deals with, in the very least, the direct harm, right? Now, here's where it gets, there's arguments. It's around lineage programs. And me personally, I know that we can do both lineage and direct harm, right? We know where people were redlined, and those people are still living, right? Many are. I do look at like taking steps to this. I look at momentum. Right now you have momentum around issues that are still with us. Like that, when you're talking about housing discrimination, redlining, environmental injustice, policing, things like that, let's go with that low-hanging fruit, right? But I'm a pragmatist in this regard, so deal with the direct harm. In addition, I do believe that in some cases you deal with services that could benefit multiple people. But still just having this idea that if we create a mortgage program that will address wealth inequity, knowing that, hey, some white Latino brothers and sisters will take advantage of this program as well, I'm okay with that. But I'm also just very passionate about, we also must deal with the direct harm as well. So there's some, put it plainly, cut the check. There's services. There's systems in place that we can do. We should take a stab at all of those things. And sometimes it'll be more palatable to do the thing that captures everyone. Sometimes it'll take a more courageous step to deal with the direct harm. But in many places, we are dealing with housing, environmental injustice, policing issues. And I'm definitely fine with that. But it's, it is a contentious issue.
Yeah.
Very contentious. Well, it doesn't have to be. And for me, this is the thing. I'm also a big believer in movements making the demands. Like if what you're seeing at the municipal level are communities organizing and making the demand. Like if you're particularly if you're in elected office, and you organize, mobilize, and get something on the agenda, you make it happen. I think a lot of us have been not seduced, but we've made reparations some dirty word, right?
That's right.
I mean, say it with me, reparations.
Out loud.
Reparations. And guess what? The sky didn't fall.
Right.
like we're okay. You know, and so we have to demystify that word and just say what it is. It is giving people what they deserve. I mean, and I always speak from an economic standpoint, but there's the moral case, right?
Absolutely.
But I just want to put this thing, because most people know me for my work on housing devaluation, and I always say this to put things in context. In 2018, we found that homes in black neighborhoods are underpriced by 23%, about $48,000 per home. Cumulatively, there's about $156 billion in less equity in black neighborhoods. And I always put this in perspective. $156 billion would have financed more than 4 million black-owned businesses based upon the average amount black people use to start their firm. Would have paid for more than 8 million four-year degrees based upon the average amount of a four-year public education. Replaced the pipes in Flint, Michigan 3,000 times over. Covered nearly all of Hurricane Katrina damage. It's double the annual economic burden of the opioid crisis. It's a big number. When things go wrong in black neighborhoods, we blame black people. We don't look at the wealth and opportunity that's been extracted from them. And I've never hide from the problems. And in fact, the reason why I always say that number is because we got to remind that there's nothing wrong with black people, that ending racism can solve. That thing that we have problems in our communities, no question. But this is a result of resource deprivation. And for me, this is about, do we want a better community or not? And so, and that 156 billion is, I mean, it's a big number in some sense, but it's a lot less than 3 trillion, 14 trillion, right? Right? And so for me, I'm always like, we can do a lot if we just have a few people organize, demand a county executive to do something, demand a governor to do something. It's not going to come. I mean, they are elected officials. You know, they will do what the public demands. And so, you know, so some of this is about our organizing. And that's why I go back to the whole debates around reparations, the cans. You can have divisions there, but if it erodes your ability to get something on a political agenda, then you're losing the major fight. You get what you can on the table. And you organize again and get something else on the table. And that's where, and that might sound like wishy-washy, but no, but I mean for some.
Yeah.
But I also just know that many of the gains, I've had a lot of policy gains in my life. Like the whole appraisal stuff, people know that canceling student debt, canceling medical debt, I had a hand in. I had a hand in a lot of different things. A lot of my wins came because someone else lost 30 years ago.
That's right.
Right? That you keep fighting. And just because one governor or one president doesn't do something does not mean the fight is over.
No, it's not.
Right? So for me, it's about understanding that this is long-range game.
Yeah.
And you just gotta keep fighting, keep organizing, but keep doing the right thing. So that's why I don't think it's wishy-washy, because I am a beneficiary of people fighting and not giving.
Absolutely.
And not giving up. And so that's where I stand on these things.
I appreciate that. I mean, I think that you know, I am a person of a certain age, right? So what I've seen is that progress is the result of incremental work. That none of the gains come overnight, that they're not always huge, though sometimes they are, right? Sometimes you get the right person with the right amount of momentum and things move further. You can get really, rapid progress, but I think things build on each other, and what we're seeing now is definitely, I can remember being a student in, the 90s, and we would go to these marches, protests, rallies, and the idea of reparations, it just seems so far off, and it seemed like it would be impossible. And to see where we are now it's sort of unbelievable that it's just like it's right there.
And
right?
people,
And it's not all going to be the same thing, maybe.
And the polling shows more and more people agree that this should be enacted in some level. It's growing. It's still not the majority of Americans by far, but it's growing because everyday people know what happens if you lose one check. Let's not talk about decades
of checks.
Right, centuries, right? So people now understand it. They're like, oh, this is what they're talking about. This is the pain. Yep. So for me, things are changing, and but you just gotta keep pushing.
So let me ask you a question. Well, I've asked you a lot of questions, but I have another question. If you were advising a community, so a community is thinking about what reparations and restorative justice looks like for them. In terms of the current conversation, we know that there are now some legal challenges to reparations programs that were actually implemented, right? The question always comes back to, can race be the factor used to decide when someone gets a government benefit, right? And so what would your advice be for a jurisdiction that is now grappling with this issue? What are the things that you think are important to focus on?
I have a book out, Black Power Scorecard, measuring the wealth racial gap and what we can do to close it. So make sure you get Black Power Scorecard. But we use a machine learning algorithm to lasso regression to identify the most important factors on life expectancy. That's the North Star. What matters for life itself? And it is clear there are certain wealth factors, and I'll just go through some of them. And these are the things you have to work on. You have to make sure incomes are at a certain level. You have to make sure home ownership and real estate ownership is there. Reason being, as I mentioned, housing is important for a number of reasons, shelter, but the intergenerational wealth transfer, but it's highly correlated with civic activities, safety, all these different things. So you need to have some type of ownership. And by the way, also commercial real estate ownership. I can go down any main street and I guarantee you the commercial real estate is owned by about 2 or 3 people. 80% of commercial real estate is owned by the top 1% of families. So we got to find ways to diversify that ownership class. Then you got to deal with business ownership. The colleagues here on the stage, many of them mentioned business ownership. The difference is that we actually start businesses at the same rate as other groups, but it's the employer firms that we need. Firms with more than 1 employee. Black people represent about 13-14% of the population, but only 3% of employer firms. So you gotta have something to deal with employer firms. Then on the social human capital side, you gotta deal with education. But here's the thing: it's not just about getting an education to know more. That's vitally important. But also, what almost as important is how are colleges and universities contracting with community members? Who gets the bus contract? Who gets the food service contract? Because it's the overall income in a county that raises life expectancy. You have environmental justice, I mentioned. If you don't have good, clean air, water, you know, all is lost. And then there's a couple other factors, and I never shy away from these. We have got to talk about family. And I'm going to break this down so that I don't want people to get confused. One of the negative predictors of life expectancy is the share of black or children not living with their father. Now, the black men actually spend as much time with their children as other men, but they're twice as likely not to live with their children, which cuts into income, right? And income is but the point is, when you control for wealth, and I'm not endorsing marriage or any particular, but when you control for wealth, relationships are just fine. So this goes back, if you get home ownership, you get income up, you deal with business ownership, you improve relationships. I'd say one of the best dating apps you could get is a good job and a house. Right? Because the funny part is, and I argue with pastors all the time about this, because they're like, get married and you'll solve the problem. I know healthier communities produce healthy relationships, not the other way around. And so, and then finally, I will also say this, because it's in the news a lot, gun fatalities are that you have to address these issues. Now, to be clear, incarceration is one of the worst things you can do for life expectancy, because you're literally taking people out of the economy, you reduce the income, it makes matters worse. So you need to deal with the acute issues, but also understand that, again, good jobs, good schools are the ultimate antidote. So I know those are some things, but you gotta, if there were two I would start on, it'd be housing and business development. Because right now, that's where most of the wealth is concentrated for black people. And if you improve that, you improve education, you improve other outcomes. And so those are the two areas I will work on. But you have to work all these things in concert. But if I could to prioritize, so much starts with housing. And to be clear, it's not just housing affordability, it's home ownership. You know, so you can build a lot of affordable housing and keep people in perpetual debt. Essentially.
Dependency.
You're right. So for me, it's like, how can we increase ownership? And there's a balance. There's a healthy ratio between home ownership and renting that you need. If it's too slanted towards renting, that's not good. So it's about creating that balance, having affordable options, but making sure affordable options include home ownership.
And so, that being said, Ms. Faye, do you have a question?
I have to make a statement.
You know what? I'm gonna allow it. You're the only one, but you've earned it. Go ahead.
I am sitting here in my seat, almost on the floor. Thank you for what you're speaking on. But my concern, and many others, is we have an elected black governor who denied us reparations, who denied us things. We elected him. We know how political things run, but when you're in a state being a person of color, okay, where do we go? I'm listening to you, going on. So what are we going to do to help us to get out of reparations? I hear what you're saying, we know about education, we know about this, but we're here, a lot of us have left, because we want to know who's going to help us, lead us to get our governor to be responsible for what we need and what we want. You talk about the past, we live in the present.
Yeah, and I meant this when I say.
Wait a minute.
Oh.
We gotta have to account. We gotta be here to be accountable. We the people.
Yeah.
Okay, all the amendments that Constitution, everything we talk about. Like we're gonna have the orange man, we want him to be accountable for what he denied us.
Right.
And I just want to say before you respond to that question, and thank you, Ms. May. I'm glad that I saw your hand go up. One of the things that we talked about when we talked about doing this program today is focusing on what we can do locally, because there is an amount of this that, you know, I think you said, Dr. Perry, there are folks who believe that reparations are not reparations unless they're federal, right? There are a lot of schools of thought, but what we know is that people need to be having a local conversation. And what we want Dr. Perry to be doing for us today is giving us some context for having that conversation. I don't know that there is an answer that Dr. Perry can give us today about what to do about something that happened at the state. There's a lot in that conversation. Some will say he didn't deny reparations, he denied a commission because he sees that things should go forward. Others say that we need the commission to study it.
But I am very clear on this. I know Westmore, when he denied that commission, several commissioners called me, and I will give the same response I gave those callers to you. There's two things, and you mentioned them both. Elected officials are held accountable at the ballot box. And two, I really do believe you start local. Once you start moving up in the jurisdictions, I just think they're not going to respond in that way. We've seen that in several of the states where it was there. And this goes back to my long-range game. This is about organizing the multiple counties in Maryland. This is not about going after the governor at this time. I mean, it's not just, I live in Maryland. I'm in this political class. You know, I know the muckety-mucks. I also know that right now, if you don't do it at the local level, it's not going to get done. Right? And so for me, it's about finding, and even at the local level, you got to be surgical. You know, so for me, it's like, what are the programs that you're going to demand your county executive to deliver? But it's harder than it looks, because I'm telling you right now, reparations does not sell for the majority of the populations. Part of the organizing is to get people to understand that this is not going to take away from you. And this is what is morally owed. And this is what's economically beneficial. I think we just got to continue doing that work. You're doing it. Like, the one thing I will say, when I walked in and I was hearing an apology, I was like, what? I was shocked. I could see people crying. I could see people elated. And I kept saying, oh, this is just the first step. When I met your county executive, I said, this is just the first step. What's the next step? And what's the next step? But have passion, have anger against your governor. Hold your governor accountable. And be strategic. Use your energy strategically, because what's not going to happen is right now, and I know Governor Westmore. He's also my governor. I know politically speaking, that's not going to be a part of his package. And so find the next governor who will.
There you go.
So for me, but I go back to the long-range game. This is not about, it's about understanding the cards you are dealt. I know our county executive would love to chime in here. Please.
Do you want to? Are you ready? You sure? Your chief of staff says it's okay? She's not going to hit me? Okay. All right, go ahead. We're close to time, but yes, please. Yes, you can have my mic. Please do.
I mean, there's two things I want to say. One has to do with the governor, but I'll first say something about local and how hard it is and how long it takes, unfortunately. So there's been a conversation about the old Fourth Ward, and some people came to me and said, that's where we need to focus reparations. We need to focus on confronting the damage that was done in the old Fourth Ward. And I said, okay, let's talk about it. And I waited, and some conversations were taking place. Then I went to Shanika Henson, and I said, look, Shanika, we're our senator, state senator. Look, we're doing some things for the housing hack, for housing authority. We want to invest. We want to do some other things related to housing. Do you think that maybe we could put a package together specifically related to that? Because a lot of folks from the old Fourth Ward got put into public housing and it's deteriorated. So she said, hold tight. It has to come from the community. It can't come from you. So we decided to do this. Now, as far as the governor goes, I know that his work at the Robin Hood Foundation, that he understands reparations, he understands the policies that he believes work, and that he got elected governor, and he's always in a hurry. He wants to get stuff done. And what he said, take his word or not, fight him on it or not, I'm not telling you whether to fight him on it, but what he said was, I want to get this stuff done. We do another study, and it's going to take years, and we're all going to sit there and wait, and we're going to be back where we were, and I'm not going to be governor anymore, and I want to actually do some things. So the way I see what he did was, I want to deliver for people now, and I don't want to invest in a whole lot of 3-year studies. So I don't necessarily say I agree with that or disagree with that. I just think that's what he said, and that's where he's coming from. And I think that's we should at least take him for his word on that.
And I will add this, because you said something that's very important. Also, don't accept commissions as victory. Yeah. Like a lot of folks, because I've seen it go the other way. People put up commissions and nothing happens. You know, so for me, it is about, I'm glad you asked that. It's about home ownership programs. It's about business development programs. It's about clean air and water. Like, these are the things that need to be delivered, whether you call them reparations or not. And when I look at, and this is what I studied, I count how many new black homeowners we do. I can tell if you are a governor, a county executive, a mayor who's serving all residents. I can tell by looking at the numbers. And a commission is not in the, how many commission reports doesn't do, one of the things I used to, I kind of, because I'm also considered a pretty tight guy when it comes to like symbolic things. I remember during the Biden administration, you had a bunch of people swag surfing on the White House lawn. And I was like, what are we doing? You know, this is not power. So don't get confused by whether or not Westmore, if this was a denial of reparations. I'm more concerned about, are there investments in home ownership? Are there investments in these
I will
things?
applaud. Oh, as an applauser of one, I will applaud.
With that said, I also just believe in this holding people accountable. I just believe in that. Like, so for no one will run away from these things, but I'm glad this came. I knew this was going to come up at some point, but Westmore needs to defend himself, and he will, and we should see the evidence of that defense beyond a commission. He has Justice 40. He has a couple other initiatives. Are they going to deliver for you? And that's where I think you need to decide. But I'm going to continue to look at wealth. I'm going to continue to look at education. I'm going to continue to look at these things. The symbolic gestures don't move me as much.
I appreciate you saying that. I am going to give myself the privilege after a long day of sort of the last word on this, and just say that one of the things that we hoped to accomplish today, even in this conversation, is to really open up a conversation where an array of perspectives can be accommodated. Black people are not monolithic, like I said, but there are some things that data shows us that we can agree on. And in the areas where our community is not doing well because of systemic issues, because of longstanding issues, we need to be looking at what we are doing to counter a lot of negative factors and what we're doing to change outcomes for people. And that was the purpose of our previous panel. Where are your elected officials making investments? What is the data that they're using to determine how people are doing? When they make decisions about how they're going to use resources, how do they decide where they're going to put those investments? And so I'm really grateful that you took the time to emphasize the work that you've done on the wealth gap and where you think impactful investments can be made. And reparations is a big topic. It necessitates discussion, and we should not be afraid of having those conversations so that when it comes time to make the demands to the right person who's in the right position, we're speaking the same language, we know what we're asking for, and we're moving the needle forward for people in this community. I want to thank Dr. Perry so much for being here.
We got to thank Asha for doing this. I mean, this is tremendous. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank our county executive for being the architect of all of this today. I'd like to thank Cal, the Human Relations Commission, and the people of Anne Arundel County who have been working for this moment for year after year, decade after decade. Thank you very much, and please enjoy the rest of your day. And thanks to Marilyn Hall.